So what if you've been given a task to lead a team of perhaps even individuals who have talents, skills different than your own? You've been given a lot of work to do, very short deadlines, maybe no extra budget, no extra authority, and you still are committed to accomplishing your organization's vision, and you want to be a leader for your team. How do you bring these talented people toward a common goal? How do you keep them accountable? Well, a methodical, structured application of best practices, but we're going to discuss some things, some ideas that have worked in various organizations from quality management experts. When you think of, for example, Michelangelo was a very talented individual. He no doubt had a patron that kept him in walking around money. He was able to support himself by using his artistic talents. Um, Now, did he get paid per square foot of how he painted? You kind of see in this picture here he's working on the ceiling, and maybe those are some stakeholders down there at the bottom checking on his progress. Well, how do we do that? How do we maintain accountability? How do we measure progress? We're going to look at some ways that even if you don't understand what your people are doing, get their buy-in, keep them engaged, be a leader, and there's ways to do that. So maybe your challenge is that you have work stream in from stakeholders as projects. So you have planned work, and that's okay. You can kind of map that out, and you can work with your people back and forth to see how you're doing on it, looking for milestones and such. It's pretty simple, right? But then how about all this unplanned work? These tasks that come in that are creative, that kind of match your job description or the job description of your people in your team. But how do you keep them motivated when they have unplanned work? How about when there's log jams, when people in other parts of the organization aren't cooperating? Is there a silo of accountability? Do you have to go up the organization and come back down to get something done? There are ways to grow in that idea of peer accountability and truly teach leadership as a part of your organization. One nice, simple daily check-in that's been used by a lot of teams is the daily stand-up or the scrum. Kind of huddle together as a small group and describe, okay, here's what I worked on yesterday, here's what I'm planning on doing today, and maybe here's some obstacles that I have probably running into. Now, other people in the team just wait their turn, but they listen for those obstacles, and maybe if they can help, they can talk to you offline after the scrum meeting. But you want the scrum meeting to be like 5 minutes or less than 10, certainly not longer than 10 or 15 minutes. And you don't want to have too gigantic of a team. But if everyone kind of, it's not necessarily justify your existence, but be accountable to the peers in your team so they know you're working on things too. We're all in this together, so to speak. And it's not to, point fingers and look down at folks and try to micromanage every single task, but rather promote that idea of peer accountability. So a daily stand-up or scrum is an excellent idea. And, you would imagine it very likely that someone checked in with Michelangelo every day. Hey, how's it going? What are you working on today? So nothing wrong with that. I will say I had a boss that had read about Scrum and did a daily meeting, but he kind of had a wrong attitude. It was more of a boss and not a leader. In fact, when we started working from home because of the recent pandemic, he was so worried that he was going to lose control that he would have 3 scrums a day, morning and lunch and the afternoon. He was worried they weren't going to be doing something when he couldn't see them physically with his eyes. Well, what did he get? He got what he wanted. Employees that did what they were told and no more. Employees that were disengaged. And that kind of thinking, it's not leadership. It's not going to accomplish the mission. So if you have geniuses that you have to patron, so to speak, that's a good thing to attract people that know more than you, that have talents that you don't have. Because what's the alternative? A mindless drone. There's a Bible verse that says to the effect that a king's glory is his subjects. So if you're the king, if you're the boss, the manager, and your subjects, your employees of your team are lack of a better term, morons, where's the glory to you? But now, if you have people on your team that are smarter than you, more talented than you, and they work with you to accomplish the organization's mission, that's leadership because they respect you, they support you, and they work together with you. That kind of thing is the leadership that we want to develop. So there are ways that we can accomplish that, and we're going to look into some of those. So here we see the picture of an elephant and a rider. Well, psychologist Jonathan Haidt described this scenario as the elephant picturing ourselves and the rider picturing ourselves together. The elephant is our emotional self. It's irrational. It's driven by instinct and emotion. The rider is our higher cognitive function, so to speak, the direction, our conscious effort, and our mental powers. So the rider, he can see the path ahead and kind of provide direction. In fact, he said something to the effect of that perched atop the elephant, the rider holds the reins and seems to be the leader. But the rider's control is precarious because the rider is so small relative to the elephant. Anytime the 6-ton elephant and the rider disagree about which direction to go, the rider is going to lose. He's completely overmatched. That totally encapsulates the idea of culture eats process for breakfast, doesn't it? No matter how smart the rider is, does he actually get to where he wants to go? Or maybe he's been assigned to go if the elephant doesn't want to go that way. How does that conscious effort, that rational person, direct that elephant in a way to get him to move? Well, you can just look at different methodical practices to try to overcome that inertia that could happen. In fact, there's a Wall Street Journal article in 2010 had mapped the effectiveness of Six Sigma change initiatives. But over a 5-year period, 60% of them failed. So they may have initial success, and then it's okay. Hey, we're done. We fixed the problem. We've adjusted all these people, and we're all the herd's going this right way, and we're getting these things. And over 5 years, it failed because they didn't effectively manage the folks. And that includes ourselves sometimes, effectively changing habits. So how can we motivate the elephant? We have to tap into emotion. We have to build a rapport and grow in our mutual respect with ourselves, but with our team. The rider, he can improve the chances of the elephant staying on course by shortening the distance. So it takes some effort, some mental effort to think, how can we make it easier for people to do what has been tasked to them to do? Also, how can we remove any obstacles in the way? That may be within the purview of the rider, the rational element of us, to shorten the distance, to remove obstacles. Those kinds of things may make a lot bigger difference than an overhyped project, perhaps. So direct and motivate and shape is all about building a relationship with your team, and then you can get buy-in and engagement. I'm going to look more in the next slide. So here's an example of a scientific approach to direct that emotional elephant, so to speak, that irrational, habit-driven, inertia person that we all are. How can an organization work with everyone to maybe mold their habits and try to urge them and steer them toward the organization's vision? Well, this is one of those models, kind of like statistician George Box said, all models are wrong, but some are useful, right? So this is one that's definitely useful. Thomas Gilbert, he had in the past talked about his leisurely theorems. One of these was of worthy performance. That was performance that accomplished something. And if you analyze improvement, recognize the need for intervention, it's got to lead to a greater increase in that worthy performance, invaluable accomplishments. And you want those valuable accomplishments when you do spend time and work and effort to it's costly behavior from a time standpoint and maybe even a money standpoint to try to intervene and direct an organization and a team. It takes a lot of one-on-one time with your people to get them to change their behavior, right? Well, that's got to have a greater increase in accomplishment than from a ratio standpoint from the behavior that it costs. So in this model, you have along the left side there, you have the source of the things, the information, tools, and motivation. One, that picture of the building kind of represents the organization, and the picture of the person represents the individuals in the organization. So what does each bring to the table? What do they work together to accomplish? Well, the organization may provide objectives, and may provide a direction, they have expectations, and they give feedback. Well, the information that the employee provides is the technical skills, the managerial skills, all their knowledge. So if both don't bring their side to the table, the mission's probably not going to get accomplished. If the person doesn't have objectives, they have no direction, if they don't know what's expected of them, and never get feedback, you know what happens when that occurs in your organization. In the same way, if the people aren't engaged, they're not going to bring their technical skills or their knowledge to the table. So both are required, and someone's got to start first, right? So the organization can do that. You as a team leader can do that. And so you may have tools like a budget or a staff, processes, facilities. You want your people to bring their capacity of emotional strength, intellectual strength, their talents, physical strengths, all those things to bear on the problem of accomplishing your organization's mission, as well as motivation. Your organization provides motivation in the form of incentives, rewards, recognitions, penalties for behavior that needs to be adjusted. And then your team members have to bring their values, their goals, their personal needs to the table. And so you see how these things complement each other. And when the organization does its job of providing that model and that pattern, then probably the majority of the time, I would say, the elephant has a shorter distance to go. The elephant has less obstacles to be able to make changes, make improvements to accomplish what it needs to be done. Because you want a powerful elephant on your side to get things done, but you recognize that there's got to be a rational overall idea to kind of keep things moving along in an organized way. So putting your emotions into it can also help connect with the individual. And to the individual, you may represent the organization, right? So what are some ways that you can come up with a collaboration? How can you come up with good ideas and make sure the best ideas are the ones that are put to use? Well, we can, oftentimes a team, you might see activities like brainstorming. Well, a storm is typically chaotic, right? So you want some directed creativity. You may describe the problem even beforehand, before you get together. You don't want to waste time in meetings. No one wants that. Maybe describe the problem in an email and then give people time to meditate on the solution. And when you follow through in that meeting and say, look, this is the only thing we're going to do. Here's the agenda. Here's what we're going to do is we're going to discuss this problem. We're going to come up with ideas to fix it, and then we're going to leave. You'll get buy-in eventually when people say, yeah, he actually said that we were going to have a 30-minute meeting or a 15-minute meeting, and this is all we talked about, and this is what we worked on, and we were all expected to bring ideas to the table. And so I'm going to go ahead and put my effort in to bring an idea so that I can put a sticky note on the wall, and then we can all vote on how well we think it is, right? Maybe put a little marker there. So, following through and being honest with your people, you have a discussion of the top ideas. And then when people bring their ideas and they put their sticky note and no one votes on it, well, you can take that dissent offline and talk to them one-on-one about why they didn't, and then that might motivate them to put more mental effort into coming up with those ideas, or maybe building their own feedback with other people on the team. So if you like to um, fix problems, you've got to be able to communicate, and that might be something that you grow into, right, with folks. Um, because I really appreciate something that GM researcher Charles Kettering said. He said, "A problem well stated is half solved." And that's similar to the quote that was attributed to Einstein, where he said if he was given an hour to save the world, he'd spend 55 minutes defining the problem. Or the poet Cicero, if I had more time, I'd have written a shorter letter. So those are skills that takes time and practice. And in your team, getting everyone bought into that idea. You can also apply the trees principles to find answers to inevitable problems. Try to look for the ideal final result, the TRIZ method, where you study existing problems, existing solutions rather, and then when new things come up, you look at, okay, can we find those solutions um, and apply them to our problems, right? So another great tool is the use of Kanban boards. Um, it'll help your team to translate the detailed problem to quantifiable work that the stakeholders will pay for because they can understand it. So in this example, here's a team. You've got Tony, MC, John, BC, and Jimmy. They each have their own swim lane. And here's what's on deck. There's a couple things on deck. Here's probably a couple of ideas, main things that I'm going to try to accomplish pretty soon. And then there's one vertical column. Hey, here's actually what I'm actively working on today. Because really, what can you focus on? Uh, can you focus on 5 things at a time? If everything is high priority, is anything a priority? So sometimes you have to say, okay, here's what I'm working on is actively. And if there's a block on that, the stuff that's on deck, that's what I'll do next. And you see off to the left, there's a whole bunch of sticky notes. That's the backlog. That's the things that the overall team has to do. Um, and then you'll see some other columns of internal and external review. Maybe, hey, kind of here's what I've got my part done. I'm waiting for someone else internally to review it, or maybe an external customer to review it. But this is an excellent way to have a visual representation of work. Maybe even review this in your Scrum daily meeting. Here's what I'm working on today, and if I get that done, these are the next 2 things I would work on. And then if a stakeholder says, "Well, what's Jimmy doing, or what's John doing?" Well, let's go to the board and look. So they say, "Well, I really want him to do this." Okay, so we'll do that. You can pick up that sticky note and move it into the active spot, and then they realize, oh wait, that means he's not going to work on that. So it's a good way to kind of push back a little bit to stakeholders. That, well, what do you want to move around to change their priority? That's an excellent tool I found to help people understand, especially in those detailed technical words. I don't really understand what they do, but I know what I need done. Well, you want your engineers to encapsulate that in small pieces that are understandable, and then state that so that the stakeholders can understand what's going on. So that's an excellent tool I found using a Kanban board. And there are electronic versions, obviously, too, but sometimes just an old sticky note on the board makes a difference. But regardless, you want people to be motivated, right? So is money the most important motivation? You notice our little picture there. Nothing says get back to work like a savage beating. Is that what you want? Is that how you're going to motivate people? Why do people leave a job? There was a Gallup study of managers that stated the manager accounts for at least 70% of the variance in employee engagement. So if some employees are engaged, look at their manager. And you may have to put in the effort to get to know your people in your team, to make a study of each person, to find out what they're passionate about, see if it can fit with their job, study their talents, fit the job around them. And you know there's going to be limits to what may fit with the company's vision, but how committed are they to that? Instead of a exit interview, finding out after the fact why they left, is there an entry interview? Can you sit down with your people occasionally and say, what do you want? What do you like to do? What do you enjoy doing? What are you passionate about? And if they don't say anything, then they're passionate about something, but you just haven't built the rapport yet. Fascinating when you think about the idea that there was a Wall Street Journal article in 2016 that said that 5% of your workforce produces 26% of your company's output. So if 5% of your people are covering over a quarter of the output of your company, that means that you've got some rock stars, some superstars in your organization. Are you trying to um, make sure that they're not blocked on anything and let them work as fast as they want and accomplish as much as you can to reach your company's vision? Um, Now that means that 95% of our workforce is accomplishing 74%. So what could we do? We've got to spend some time developing ourselves and our team. Because if you don't have some kind of feedback, if you don't have a feedback loop, you might hire Homer Simpson, and then he stays there forever, and no one goes back and fixes it. And you don't want that as an organization. There was a 2018 Harvard Business Review article that was called "Why People Really Quit Their Jobs," and it said that we should try to enable them to do work they enjoy, help them play to their strengths, and carve a path for career development that accommodates their personal priorities. So we want to motivate them and build that rapport with them so that they're not just involved but committed. Um, and there was a Forbes article that said that motivators are inexpensive but time consuming. So just spending one-on-one time, close the door, sit down, let's talk a little bit. Um, as a manager, that's what you need to do is spend time with people so that you can find out how you can get them to contribute and be motivated. So to change the results that you are trying to achieve, you've got to change the people somewhat. And that may involve, again, changing their habits and such as that, right? So how do you point to good behavior? You see the picture there of the monkey see the action happening or doing the action. Similar brain activity. Scientific studies say that the neurons fire in a similar way when observing something. So when you have rewards, when you have recognition, even if the person themselves are not seeing the rewards come to them, it fires similar neurons in the brain. So you do have to test the effectiveness of the rewards and recognition program that you have, and you want to reward those who achieve the desired results, and you may need to remove those who do not, because people pay attention. Your team's going to pay attention. What is the activity that's rewarded? What is the activity that is not rewarded? So if your strategy is vague, if there's conflicting priorities, if there's punishment for trying to improve, then that's going to fire things in the brain, right? That's going to reinforce ideas. So what ideas are you putting out there? You may be familiar with the 5 monkeys experiment. Again, how scientific that was or not, um, it can make a difference. It seems like we've seen that kind of behavior where people will punish someone for doing something even when they don't understand it because that's the way it's always been done. So a reward and recognition program is a fine tool that you can use to reinforce good behavior in your team. And it can be something simple. I remember myself a few years back, I wasn't able to wasn't able to recommend a certain amount of raises, but I got bowling trophies customized for each member of my team with something specific about their personality and something they'd done that year on the little plaque piece. And several of those guys put those trophies right front and center on their desk. Um, so I think it made an impression on them to know that they were appreciated, and they had a cultural artifact, an artifact of the company culture there to show that we want to reward good behavior. Another point has to do with what you're measuring as a company. And again, you may have seen the comparison between a thermostat and a temperature gauge, right? So are you setting something or are you just watching something? And you want to get it to the point of setting something, right? So you want to set a target and reach it, not just simply monitor it. You don't want to just collect data for no reason. But what you measure is important. If the only things that you measure are money related, that's what you're teaching is, hey, that's the only thing that's important to management is how much money we're making. Not to say that that's not important, but are you measuring job satisfaction? Are you measuring retention? Things like that, or setting and reaching of yearly goals? Are you setting meaningless targets and then that becomes the subject of Goodhart's law, that when a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure because people inherently just game the system, right? So you've got to put some study, some mental effort into finding things to measure, to identify what could be good. I really appreciated something in Henry Mintzberg's book Managing, and also in an interview he was interviewed in the 2009 Wall Street Journal article, where he said the great myth is the manager as orchestra conductor. He said management is more like an orchestra conducting during rehearsals when everything is going wrong. And he mentioned three planes: information, people, and action is the way we manage. So we manage by information, manage through other people, or actually getting out and doing it ourselves, going to the gemba. I remember one manufacturer I worked with, the boss, his name was James. Was introduced to him as James. When I'd go and interview the guys on the floor, they'd say, "Yeah, Jimmy came by and he says he wants us to do this, and Jimmy said we were going to do that." And that just familiarity with the guys on the floor, it made an impact on those folks. So they knew that he had set goals and he was doing things to make sure that would happen. Something that Mintzberg also said in that article, he said, "Today I think we have too much managing through information, what I call deeming. People sit in their offices and think they're very clever because they deem that you will increase sales by 10% or out the door you go. That's the worst of managing through information. The alternative is to give more attention to the people plane and the action plane. Even when you're managing information, you can manage it in a much more nuanced way than just shooting a bunch of figures around." So that's an essential part of picking good measures. And lastly, I just want to reemphasize the need for leadership, getting in the trenches with your people that you're working with and your teams, build that rapport, build that peer accountability, and be accountable to your team as well. I really appreciate something that was brought out in an experience in the book on alignment, which I'll have references to in the last slide. But it's told a good tale of leadership. It said, according to an old Chinese legend, there was once a Mongolian prince who begged his father for the chance to prove his worth in battle. The father honored his son's request and granted him 1,000 warriors. The prince assembled his horsemen, erected a large target for them to shoot at, and gave the command to shoot. 1,000 arrows flew through the air. Some hit the target, most did not. Each day, the prince drilled the warriors, making the target smaller and smaller as accuracy increased. The final test of the warriors' readiness was to have them shoot at a horse. Now, Mongolian horsemen prize their animals more than anything else on earth. And at the prince's command, 1,000 arrows were unleashed and 1,000 arrows hit their mark. Now we are ready, the prince declared. That prince was Genghis Khan, the infamous warrior and leader who went on to conquer territory 500 times larger than his own. So you can be that, like that Mongol prince, when you're in the trenches with people, learning from each other what works, what doesn't, and building that rapport and mutual respect to accomplish great things in your organization and great things in your team as a fine leader. Now you'll notice here are some references that I'll leave up, some books that I've pulled this information from, and I highly recommend reading and having as part of your library.